In the name of the Roman Catholic Church, I condemn you to death for all your heretical perversities and distance from all that is good and holy. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santo. Amen.
I had swooned, but still will not say that all of consciousness was lost. What of it there remained, I will not attempt to define, or even to describe. Yet all was not lost. Arousing from the most profound of slumbers, we break the gossamer web of some dream. Yet in a second afterwards, we remember not that we have dreamed. In the return to life from the swoon, there are two stages. First, that of the sense of mental or spiritual. Secondly, that of the sense of physical existence. It seems probable that if, upon reaching the second stage, we could recall the impressions of the first, we should find these impressions eloquent in the memories of the gulf beyond. He who has never swooned is not he who finds strange palaces and wildly familiar faces in coals that glow. Is not he who beholds floating in mid-air the sad vision that the many may not view. Is not he who ponders over the perfume of some novel flowers. Is not he whose brain grows bewildered with the meaning of some musical cadence which has never before arrested his attention. I had fallen at the very brink of a circular pit, whose extent, of course, I had no means of ascertaining at the moment. In other conditions of mind, I might have had courage to end my misery at once by a plunge into one of these abysses. But now I was the veriest of cowards. Neither could I forget what I had read of these pits, that the sudden extinction of life formed no part of their most horrible plan. A deep sleep fell upon me, a sleep like that of death. How long it lasted, of course, I know not. But when once again I unclosed my eyes, the objects around me were visible. I was enabled to see the extent and aspect of the present under the terrible circumstances which environed me than the mere dimensions of my dungeon. But my soul took a wild interest in trifles, and I busied myself in endeavors to account for the error I had committed in my measurements. I surveyed the ceiling of my prison. It was some 30 or 40 feet overhead, the picture image of a huge pendulum. There was something, however, in the appearance of this machine which caused me to regard it more attentively. While I gazed directly upward at it, I fancied that I saw it in motion. In an instant afterward, the fancy was confirmed. Its sweep was brief, and of course slow. I watched it for some minutes, somewhat in fear, but more in wonder. Looking to the floor, I saw several enormous rats traversing it. Even then, while I gazed, they came up in troops hurriedly, with ravenous eyes, allured by the scent of meat. What boosts it to tell for the long hours of horror more than mortal, during which I counted the rushing oscillations of the steel. Inch by inch, line by line, down and still down it came. Days passed, and it swept so closely over me as to fan me with its acrid breath. There rushed to my mind a half-formed thought of joy, of hope. Yet, what business had I with hope? It was, as I say, a half-formed thought of hope. But I felt also that I had perished in its information. In vain I struggled. Could I have broken the fastenings above my elbow? I would have seized and attempted to arrest the pendulum. My eyes followed its outward and upward wheels with the eagerness of the most unmeaning despair. They closed themselves spasmodically at the descent, although death would have been a relief. I saw that some 10 or 12 vibrations would bring the steel in actual contact with my robe. And with this observation, there suddenly came out over my spirit all the keen, collected calmness of despair. For the first time during many hours, or perhaps days, I thought, it now occurred to me that the bandage or surcingle which enveloped me was unique. I was tied by no separate cord. Was it probable that the bandage crossed my bosom in the track of the pendulum? Dreading to find my faint, and as it seemed, my last hope frustrated, I so far elevated my head as to obtain a distinct view of my breast. The surcingle enveloped my limbs and body close in all directions, save in the path of the destroying crescent. For many hours, the immediate vicinity of the low framework upon which I lay had been literally swarming with rats. They were wild, bold, ravenous, their red eyes glaring upon me as if they waited but for motionless on my part to make me their prey. They had devoured, in spite of all my efforts to prevent them, all but a small remnant of the contents of the dish. In their voracity, the vermin frequently fastened their They pressed, they swarmed upon me in their ever-accumulating heaps. I was half-stifled by their thronging pressure. Yet 1 minute, and I felt that the struggle would be over. Plainly, I perceived the loosening of the bandage. I knew that in more than one place it must be already severed. With a more than human resolution, I lay still. 3. I had but escaped death in one form of agony to be delivered unto worse than death in some others. With that thought, I rolled my eyes nervously around on the barriers of iron that hemmed me in. Something unusual had taken place in the apartment. For many minutes of that dreamy and trembling abstraction, I busied myself in vain, unconnected conjecture. During this period, I became aware of the origin of the sulphurous light which illuminated the cell. It proceeded from a fissure about half an inch in width, extending entirely around the prison at the base of the walls and were completely separate from the floors. The French army had entered Toledo. The Inquisition was in the hands of its enemies.